There are moments in boxing that feel more like fate than sport. Two names, two legacies, colliding under the lights with more than just pride on the line. Mike Tyson, Chris Eubank. One, a wrecking ball forged in Brooklyn's unforgiving streets, a symbol of raw power and primal ferocity. The other, a charismatic enigma from South London, blending showmanship with surgical precision. At first glance, their worlds couldn't be more different. But beneath the surface, both men were driven by something far deeper than belts or fame. They fought with ghosts behind their eyes. Ghosts that had names, memories, and consequences. Tyson was never just a fighter. He was a phenomenon. From the moment he stormed into the heavyweight scene, knocking out opponents with terrifying ease, the world watched in awe and fear. His story was steeped in chaos, from the streets to the ring to the headlines. But while many saw only the knockouts and the controversy, few understood the pain that fueled the fury. He wasn't just throwing punches. He was unleashing a lifetime of trauma. Every hook, every uppercut, was a scream from a past he'd never truly escaped. Yet even in his darkest hours, Tyson remained a spectacle, unpredictable and unmatched in his intensity. Chris Eubank, on the other hand, was calculated brilliance wrapped in a gentleman's shell. He entered arenas like a performer stepping onto a stage, his posture regal, his expressions unreadable. But behind the poise was a man who fought with ruthless precision. He didn't just aim to win, he aimed to expose his opponent's weaknesses, to outthink and outlast them. Eubank was never swayed by chaos. He thrived in control. While Tyson was a storm, Eubank was the eye of it, calm, unshaken, and silently dangerous. So what happens when chaos meets control? What unfolds when raw aggression collides with disciplined finesse? That's the question that captivated boxing fans the moment whispers of a Tyson versus Eubank showdown began to surface. It wasn't just a fantasy matchup, it was a philosophical clash. Violence versus strategy, emotion versus intellect. Two men shaped by wildly different paths, now standing across from each other with only one outcome: survival. And make no mistake, this wasn't just another fight. There were questions that hung heavy over this battle. Could Eubank's iron will and technical mastery neutralize Tyson's devastating power? Would Tyson's demons help him or haunt him in the face of an opponent who refused to be intimidated? The tension wasn't just in the clash of styles. It was in the timing, the history, the stakes. Because while the world watched with bated breath, both men knew this was more than a match. This was a test of identity. But just before gloves touched and hearts began to race, something unexpected happened. Something that neither corner could have predicted. Just as the crowd leaned forward, hearts pounding with the anticipation of that first bell, a sudden shift in the atmosphere turned the moment electric. Tyson, known for his thunderous silence during face-offs, stepped closer than expected. Too close. Eubank didn't flinch. Instead, he whispered something, inaudible to the cameras, but sharp enough to freeze Tyson mid-breath. Whatever was said, it wasn't part of the script. Tyson's eyes, usually cold and focused, blinked just once, but enough for the cameras to catch. In that instant, it was clear. This was no longer just a physical contest. Something deeper had been triggered. Behind the scenes, murmurs began circling. Word had spread that Eubank had done more than train. He'd done his homework, digging into the one thing that had long haunted Tyson, but had rarely been spoken aloud inside the ring. He then covered a past connection. A forgotten name tied to Tyson's early days. Someone from the Catskill gym. Someone Tyson had once considered family. That name, resurrected in the mind games leading up to the fight, had reopened a chapter Tyson had buried. The press didn't know the full story. Not yet, but something about Eubank's new demeanor, almost predatory beneath the polish, suggested he was using more than just boxing IQ. Meanwhile, Tyson's camp looked uneasy. His longtime trainer had picked up on the shift, noticing Tyson's eyes darting, fists twitching before the opening round. This wasn't the focused predator they'd prepped. This was a man battling something invisible, but no less dangerous than the opponent across the ring. And Eubank knew it. Every gesture, every smirk, every slight tilt of the head, it was all part of a psychological war Tyson hadn't expected. The tension spilled into the opening exchanges. Tyson came forward with trademark aggression, but his timing was off by a fraction. Eubank, usually a slow starter, was unusually sharp, slipping punches and countering with precision that didn't just score points. It sent messages. Tyson was hitting air, and every miss chipped away at his confidence. But beneath the surface, a more intriguing subplot was developing. Eubank wasn't simply trying to win. He was trying to expose something. And if the rumors were true, this was personal in a way no one watching could have imagined. What began as a classic style versus style match was quickly transforming into something more layered. The fight was no longer just physical. Eubank's strategy wasn't limited to footwork and feints. It was psychological warfare, and he was pressing on an old wound Tyson wasn't prepared to reopen. Just as the second round ended and both corners regrouped, a slip of paper exchanged hands in Tyson's corner, folded, crumpled, and handed off by someone not on the official team list. Tyson glanced at it for a split second before turning away, and in that look, something cracked. He wasn't just fighting Eubank anymore. He was fighting something far older, far deeper. And then, just before the third round began, the announcers hesitated. The commission was moving toward Tyson's corner, confusion on their faces, and suddenly, the cameras cut briefly, just for a second. But by the time they returned, the energy in the arena had shifted again, and no one could have predicted what was about to come next. A soundless moment stretched through the arena, just the shuffle of trainers, the low buzz of uncertainty, and Tyson standing still, sweat beading across his shoulders like a man caught between two timelines. The third round was about to begin, but something had changed. He wasn't bouncing on his feet anymore. He wasn't snarling through his mouthpiece. Across the ring, Eubank stood poised, chin tucked, eyes watching like he knew exactly what was happening inside the storm. Then Tyson nodded, not to Eubank, not to the crowd, but to someone in the second row. A woman, unremarkable in appearance, wearing a faded hat pulled low, met his glance with a stare that cut through the noise. No one else seemed to notice, but it was clear now. She was connected to whatever had been scribbled on that crumpled note. For the first time, the story outside the ring had entered it completely, wrapping itself around Tyson's fists like invisible tape. The bell rang, and Tyson exploded forward, not wild, but sharp. The delay, the distraction, the confusion. It all evaporated as he slipped under Eubank's jab and launched a left hook that whistled past his opponent's temple. Eubank staggered, not from the punch, but the shift in energy. Tyson was back, but this time, not just with fury. He had purpose, and that made him far more dangerous. The crowd roared as both men exchanged at a brutal pace, strategy giving way to instinct. Eubank, usually the master of rhythm, couldn't predict Tyson's flow anymore. His timing was disrupted, his angles cut off. Tyson had found his center again. But then, just as the momentum tipped in Tyson's favor, Eubank dropped back and pulled something unexpected. A stance he hadn't used in years, one tied to a sparring partner he'd once spoken about in interviews with something between regret and respect. The connection clicked in Tyson's mind, and in that instant, he understood. The woman in the crowd, the note, the whisper before the fight, it all led back to one man, Kevin Holloway, a name buried deep in Tyson's early days. A friend turned foe, a sparring session that ended with betrayal and silence. Eubank hadn't just poked the memory. He had trained under Holloway's shadow in secret. The twist wasn't that Eubank was playing mind games. The twist was that he had taken lessons from someone Tyson had never forgiven. But Tyson didn't crumble. He adjusted. Instead of unleashing rage, he began to read. Every shoulder twitch, every angle, every sell. For the first time, the brawler was thinking like a tactician. And in the final round, with the crowd on its feet and seconds ticking down, he slipped Eubank's signature uppercut and returned fire with a body shot so perfectly placed it left Eubank breathless, staggered against the ropes. The bell saved him, but it was clear who had claimed the edge. The fight went the distance, but the judges didn't need long. A split decision, dramatic for the cameras, but inevitable in tone. Tyson's hand was raised, not because of brute force, but because he had overcome something much bigger than his opponent. He had fought through memory, betrayal, and manipulation, and in the end, found clarity in chaos. As the crowd cheered and the cameras closed in, Tyson stepped at Eubank, not with hostility, but with a quiet nod of respect. Whatever war had been waged between them had ended, but as he exited the ring and passed the woman in the crowd, she handed him something else. This time, not a note, but a faded photo of 3 young boxers from years ago. Tyson froze, staring at the third face. It wasn't Holloway. It was someone neither he nor Eubank had mentioned publicly. A third figure who had vanished without explanation, and whose story, it seemed, wasn't finished just yet.